Reagan Bush headquarters at Union Square are very excited about the preliminary results. They all seem optimistic and think that Reagan is going to take the country by a wide margin. And next door, where it's a little bit quieter, there's still a cheerful mood. But there they are also projecting that Reagan will win in Montgomery. Mayor Emery Falmer, who is one of the strongest supporters that Reagan had in Montgomery, was jumping around doing war hoops, and he seems quite certain that Reagan is going to win the entire election. Many of these supporters will be coming down later this evening to the downtowner, where we will be set up for live reports. But from Union Square, they're very optimistic. This is Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Admiral Jeremiah Denton went to the polls early this morning about 10:30, where he cast a straight Republican Party vote. He was accompanied by his wife. As when Denton went to the polls this morning, the turnout has been heavy all throughout the day in Mobile. Voter turnout across the state has been good, and Denton feels good about that. The race has been a dead heat in the last several weeks, with only 15% or so of the voters undecided. And it's those votes Denton most hopes for now on Election Day.
The undecideds are leaning one way or the other. Now, what is the likelihood they're going to vote? I think from what the so-called experts have told me, that's going to decide this election.
The Denton State headquarters on Mobile's west side has been busy all day getting in touch with registered voters and encouraging them to go to the polls and vote for the Rear Admiral. Denton's campaign has been one of the strongest Republican challenges for an Alabama Senate seat since James Martin ran against Lister Hill back in 1962. This is the atrium room at the Mobile Hilton, reserved by the Denton campaign as a place where they'll watch the returns come in tonight, along with all of the television, radio, and newspaper people. And Denton will be in his private room upstairs. Denton hopes later that he can come downstairs to the atrium room and deliver a victory speech. But he says if he doesn't, he'll call Folsom, congratulate him, then make plans for a fishing trip. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News, Mobile.
One thing about you can't get this bunch down. What's that? I want to say it's been a good race. You've all been great workers. You've all handled yourself with dignity and fashion and the spirit of true Alabamians. And I'm proud of that. Nobody in this room has anything to be ashamed of. And we're all having a good time here tonight. It has been a long race, and I appreciate from the bottom of my heart the work that you put in for me. I can never express my sincere appreciation for all that you've done in this campaign. I sit here tonight very proud for the number of people across the state who supported me throughout Alabama. I will never forget that. It has been a great honor. I do not feel any remorse in my heart or any pain if I feel it is for you who have given so much during this campaign and all that you have done during this campaign. You know, I kept hearing this time and again, I wanted to say this, is that they kept telling me, says, you're too young. You know, you're too young, Jim. I'll tell you, I can live that down. But it has been a long race, tough race. I understand. What are the percentages now? Is it 6-24? 51-49. I would, unless we ran a good race. We ran a good race, barring some changes, barring some computer mess-ups or some problems in the tabulations. I think the numbers are pretty evident. I would congratulate my opponent, a worthy opponent, and he did. Looks like he is going to be the victor. But we are victors in spirit, is that right? want to say as a Democrat that the sun, it's been tough on us Democrats tonight all over the nation. But
why don't you quote MacArthur and say ye shall return?
It's been tough on Democrats all over the nation, all over this nation. This has been a bad year for us Democrats. But the sun will shine again someday. It always does. Tomorrow's another day. But I would like to sincerely say once again that you have served well. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your vote, your help, all of you here, and your support. And I want to tell all the people out there who voted for me how much I appreciate their help. And we ran a good race. We ran a clean race. I would like to say, being a Democrat in this state, I would like to say one thing. I would hope that we can unite in the future years ahead and remain the great traditional party that this state has always had. I wish that sincerely. And I want to tell you that God be with you. I want everybody to have a good time, enjoy yourself, and strike up the band Andre.
At Montgomery's Bellingrath Community Center, where Governor and Mrs. Fobb James vote, at least 100 voters lined up before the polls opened at 8 this morning. A heavy stream of voters filed into the center to cast their ballots for the first hour and a half. Governor and Mrs. James were expected here shortly after the polls opened. They arrived at 9:25 and spent about a half hour to talk with voters and to cast their ballots. Mrs. James, the first to cast hers, took 45 seconds. The governor says he had to read some of the amendments, and he took 2 minutes and 25 seconds to cast his ballot.
Governor, are you surprised at the good turnout this
Oh, I'm delighted to see this turnout. Delighted to see it.
The average time for most voters to cast their ballots here at Bellingrath is about 2 minutes. Many say today's turnout is the biggest for an election they've seen in some time. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
rolling? Okay. Mr. White, it appears that you have been defeated by the incumbent, Mr. Dickinson. Are you ready to concede?
Well, if the trend continues as it now shows, George, I would think that Mr. Dickinson will go on to win this race. And, of course, first of all, let me say that I want to congratulate Mr. Dickinson on his victory and say to him that he's the first politician ever to defeat me. This is my 6th race, and I've never lost one before. And I want to say to all of the people who voted for me, and there were thousands of them in the 2nd Congressional District, that I appreciate that very much, and I hope that they will now get behind the winner and do all that they can to help make this democracy a success, because that's what democracy is all about, is that those who lose join in the camps of the winners and work for the betterment of this nation. Now, in addition to that, I want to say to the Montgomery Advertiser and to the rich and powerful here in Montgomery that they hadn't heard the last of Cecil White. I will return to the Alabama legislature more determined than ever that the voice of the average citizen will be heard. And for the next 2 years, I'm dedicated to that proposition that I will make sure that the voice of the average citizen is heard.
Thank you very much. Okay. Ready to go? Billy Joe Camp. Mr. Camp, first, congratulations on your
Thank you, George.
victory.
Thank you.
What do you contribute to such an outstanding victory?
Well, George, I would like to think that we got to some of the key issues in the campaign, getting credibility and confidence back into the Public Service Commission. And what I like to say is taking a realistic approach to the regulatory problem in Alabama. And we tried to do a real extensive job of getting to the people back in the Democratic primary. Had a good win then and sort of rode that on through here. We didn't have a lot of money for the advertising and everything that we would have liked to have had in the general election, but we did make a lot of personal appearances and personal contacts, telephone contacts, and I think that all paid off. Also, well, I'd like to say to the people tonight, thank you. I'm most grateful for the vote I've received. I know that I had to receive a lot of crossover voting, split ticket voting of people who voted for Governor Reagan and others, and I'm most grateful for that. And I'm going to do the best job that I can to live up to the confidence that the people have expressed in me through this vote.
Will we see much of a change in the PSC with you as president?
Well, I think you're going to see a new direction, a more comprehensive look at the things that involve the total picture of utilities and the delivery of utility service. I've touched on a couple of things in the campaign that I'll briefly mention. That is bringing together the southeastern states, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and Florida in particular, because we've got so much common interest in that this is the area that makes up the Southern Company, which Alabama Power is a subsidiary of. Not in a punitive aspect, but to try to find some real answers as we look at the total picture here. Also, I think we've got to look at what we are doing to ourselves in the nature of government regulations. You know, the government is all of us collectively, and when we put regulations on the industries that cause them to have to do certain things, that's adding cost down the line, and it might be astonishing to find out how much of the cost that's in that kilowatt hour that we use in our home that's there as a result of regulations that we've put on. So I think we've got to find what that cost is, lay it out and look at it, and then see if we need all these things that we've required ourselves to do.
Well, thank you very much, and again, congratulations.
Thank you, George. Thank you very much.
You're exactly right. We need a win. I was interested to hear what some of the Pittsburgh Steelers said yesterday. They eked one out 22-20 over Green Bay, a couple of bad snaps on punts, and Joe Green, who's been playing as long as I can remember, said it doesn't matter. It was a win. We needed a win. It seemed like a month since they'd won one. Well, it seems like that long for us, even though it's been just 2 weeks in a row. But our players need a win. They're working hard and they're giving effort, and we need to make something good happen for us.
Southern Miss presents a lot of problems. They have a good offense and a good defense.
They certainly do. One of the most versatile offenses that we've faced this year. Their quarterback is a great player. He's the key to it. We'll have to stop him running and passing. Collier's just a fine player. Their tailback's leading the nation in scoring, Sammy Winder. They have a tight end that kind of looks like Gargantua. Harvey is a great blocker and a good pass receiver. With quality athletes like that and a good sound offensive line, they've been very, very consistent on offense, and they can beat you running or passing.
The second floor of the Mobile Hilton was swarming with Republicans watching the election returns, particularly those in the U.S. Senate race. Their candidate, Jeremiah Denton, was secluded in his 18th floor suite where he and his family watched Republican Ronald Reagan take an early presidential win. But it took much longer for Denton to claim victory. In one of two appearances before general supporters at about 10 o'clock, Denton was only claiming cautious optimism. Campaign Director Dale Ritchie said Denton would go no further because the race wasn't decided until the last votes were counted. Down on the first floor, Denton staff workers were on the phone checking and confirming results and keeping a constant line open for any possible concessions calls from Folsom. It never came, but there were a number of times excitement bubbled over the rumor that such a call was being made. One floor above Denton's private suite, a group of supporters saw Denton a couple of times, but even among these, his closest supporters, Denton wouldn't go beyond being cautiously optimistic. Midnight, only a handful of reporters and photographers on the second floor waiting for a development. 1 o'clock, staff headquarters on the first floor. Confirmation of a statement to the press by Folsom conceding the race. Within minutes, the news was taken to Denton on the 18th floor, and about 10 minutes later, Denton's shield of cautious optimism melted into the thrill of victory. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News, Mobile.
Today, for the first time in several weeks, Jim Folsom Jr. was not dressed in a coat and tie, and he was not campaigning. He spent the morning relaxing at home here in Montgomery, talking with friends, supporters, and family members who came by to visit. He spoke briefly with reporters and seemed to be in good spirits. What started out to be a strong campaign for young Folsom ended last night with a narrow defeat by his opponent, Jeremiah Denton, who drew 50% of the statewide vote as compared to Folsom's 48%. At midnight, he conceded.
I do not feel any remorse in my heart or any pain if I feel it is for you who have given so much during this campaign.
This morning, Folsom talked about his loss.
Had a Reagan landslide, more or less, across the nation and here in the state. And we had a lot of straight ticket voting.
Folsom was asked about his political future and the possibility of running for governor in 1982.
I never say never about anything, but at this point in time, I'm not thinking about any race down the road.
Folsom says he's glad the campaign is over, and for the next few days, he plans only to relax and to get in a little fishing before returning to his duties at the Public Service Commission. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
What we have done in Alabama and what we have done in this nation is to change the direction and course of history. We are going to change this state, going to change this nation from a welfare state. We're going to stop taking money from the producers to give to the non-producers. We're going to create jobs and create incentive to work. It's also
Governor James, a former member of the Alabama Republican Executive Committee and elected as a Democrat in 1978, commented prior to an advisory board meeting with the Alabama Development Office. First item on the agenda, the appointment by the governor of Kay Ivey as Assistant ADO Director. Miss Ivey, a former Mobile Bank executive, joined the governor's staff in 1979. Turning to industrial growth in Alabama, James reminded the ADO board that a 10-year gap in the state's trade with Japan must be bridged to create more state payrolls. James says during his European industry hunting trip, he learned that some European businesses are seeking American participation as trade partners. The governor says recent discussions with a New York investment banking firm reveals a desire to create a capital investment pool in Alabama to help locate industry here. He appointed a 4-member committee to hear a formal presentation on the firm's proposal. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
To promote its statewide appeal last year, the group changed its name from the Birmingham Symphony to the Alabama Symphony Orchestra. Now they're attempting to upgrade the state's cultural image as well as their own standing. Supported by Governor Fob James, orchestra executives revealed their plan to become the United States' 6th world-class orchestra.
We have 5 now. They're Philadelphia, Boston, New York, Cleveland, Chicago. As you know, all of those are far above the Mason-Dixon line. So we're down here in what you might call a vacuum of opportunity. And we want to fill it with an orchestra that will be known all over the world and will exalt the name of Alabama.
The Alabama Symphony Orchestra's transformation will take a few years. It's going to be a $10 million venture, which Governor James says will come from private citizens and businesses instead of increased state funding. Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News.
Likeness, and that's what it's all about at base. Outdo me in almost anything. I want you to know about 5 days ago, my wife Jane, and the great event which Congressman Dickinson mentioned, we have.
One way to build the jail is through bond issues, an avenue commissioners say they want to avoid because it requires a referendum and voters aren't usually anxious to pay for a new jail. 2 other methods involve borrowing money through warrants with loan payments made from road and bridge taxes or a public building fund. The last possibility is a lease purchase method. That's a relatively new form of financing where payments are made from the county's regular operating budget. An advocate of the lease purchase method told commissioners the plan would be cheaper than other alternatives because of lower administrative costs. And Greg Eden says lease purchase doesn't affect the county's debt limit because in the eyes of the state, the agreement is a lease which can be terminated at any time. But he says the Internal Revenue Service considers the deal a sale, which means that any interest investors earn is tax-free. There was little discussion of where the county would get payments for any of the loan forms. Commissioner Bill Joseph says he's gun-shy of a referendum because voters might not pass it. And Mac McWhorter says with all the overcrowding problems in the present jail, federal Judge Robert Varner might not take no for an answer. Commissioners are continuing their investigation into the cheapest forms of financing. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
I think somebody's not doing their job. I don't know who. I don't, out here, come Saturday, I hope if our fans will show our, after all, they're our guests, when they start trying to call their snap count, I hope they'll show them the courtesy of being quiet and let them hear the snap count. If they don't, there should be something done about it, and something can be done about it. All you have to do is call, warn them twice, and then if you don't, after that, you give them a timeout every time, and after 3 timeouts, well, they cost you a 5-yard penalty, and no one wants to do that. No one, I don't think anyone wants to hurt the other team. They're just not thinking when they do something like that. But the cowbells are not supposed to be, there won't be any cowbells out here Saturday because the gatekeeper won't let them in.
Alabama returns 4 of the starting 5 from last year's team that finished 18-12 overall and advanced to the second round of the National Invitational Tournament. First-year head coach Wimp Sanderson is optimistic about the Tide's chances this winter.
I think we've had a real good practice sessions. Our guys have shown a real good attitude. They've worked extremely hard. I'm really tickled with them. I really am. I think they've done an excellent job. I don't know how many games we'll win, but to answer your question, at this point, after the 13th practice, I'm very optimistic.
They certainly show a lot of hustle out there. I noticed they were running today, and everybody seems together.
Well, we've got a good group of young men. You have to have good athletes to win in anything, but you have to have good people. And I think that we really have good people on this basketball team. I'm impressed with the character of this team and of all the youngsters. It's really a fun team. It's a fun team to work with.
Returning starters for Alabama include the leading scorer and rebounder of a year ago, 6'7" forward Eddie Phillips. Leadership this year is expected to come from 6'7" senior Ken Silk Johnson. 6'9" junior center Philip Lockett is back, as is 6'4" sophomore guard Mike Davis. But Sanderson is counting on several newcomers to contribute early in the season. An assistant at Alabama since 1961, Sanderson knows Southeastern Conference basketball and the teams to beat in 1980-81.
I think Kentucky's going to have a great team. I'm sure LSU and Georgia are going to be improved. And everybody in the league is really going to be good. We're the only team in the country, only conference in the country, that plays an 18-game round-robin schedule. And when you tee that thing up 18 times and go against the 9 other people we have to go up against, you better be pretty good yourself.
Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports. Alabama returns 4 of the starting 5 from last year's team that finished 18-12 overall and advanced to the second round of the National Invitational Tournament. First-year head coach Wimp Sanderson is optimistic about the Tide's chances this winter.
I think we've had a real good practice sessions. Our guys have shown a real good attitude. They've worked extremely hard. I'm really tickled with them. I really am. I think they've done an excellent job. I don't know how many games we'll win, but to answer your question, at this point, after the 13th practice, I'm very optimistic. I think Kentucky's going to have a great team. I'm sure LSU and Georgia are going to be improved. And everybody in the league is really going to be good. We're the only team in the country, only conference in the country, that plays an 18-game round-robin schedule. And when you tee that thing up 18 times and go against the 9 other people we have to go up against, you better be pretty good yourself.
Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
Instead of the former 3-step process, auto tag renewal is now computerized. You can now renew your license tag in just one stop. Although the long line doesn't indicate it, this process is actually cutting waiting time.
We're actually processing more people now, today, than we were last year at this same time. And the lines are down about 2 to 3 hours. Last year they were about 4.
Smith says the reason more people are lining up to renew their tags is due to the increased penalties if the November 15th deadline is not met. People in line had mixed reactions about the wait and the success of the new computer system.
Yeah.
How long have you been waiting in line?
About an hour or 2.
Yes, what do you think about the new system?
I like it. I really do. I think it's better.
2 hours? How is this compared to last year?
Terrible.
Last year, no problem. I just get down here early. I got down here about the second day, and of course, no problem then. But when you wait till the end, you got to suffer. You got to suffer.
Starting January, these long lines will be a thing of the past. Instead, you'll be assigned to a specific month according to your last name initial, which will lessen the crowd. Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News.
Mayor Ann is receiving a performance award. Her career began with...
He said, well, I'm sorry. I said, he's not having private audiences. He said, and there's Ariel Edge standing right there. And I suppose it's saving the family
Constitution. Besides doing an outstanding job in all of these responsibilities, she handles her own counter work and assists on other programs in her office. Congratulations.
Hence, the more clearly drafted and more broadly worded Alabama regulation should certainly say few provisions found in no regulation. But unlike advertising, moreover, it would unlike an NAIC model regulation. This creates Fourth, while this regulation is patterned after a Georgia life insurance advertising regulation, too much uniformity defeats the very strength of state regulation. Second, regulation is inapplicable to solicitation and replacement, fairly and honestly. For example, fourth, as a former Alabamian, I was reared with the understanding that Alabama did not offer of any which claimed that it had been very helpful. The regulation we're considering would require the completion of a form which is virtually identical to the relief. Prohibited by this regulation or regulated as the contrary. Third,
Representative Manley called Bale's statement made in North Alabama ridiculous when he said last week that U.S. Republican Senator-elect Jeremiah Denton was dumb for allowing himself to be taken prisoner during the Vietnam War. Bales later apologized, but Manley claims it had a great effect on the outcome of the Senate race between Denton and Jim Folsom Jr.
It was a very, very close race, and I think it was an irresponsible statement, and without having made a substantial and immediate apology or something, it had a great effect. And I don't think George ought to continue to serve as chairman of the Democratic Party in the state. I think he ought to resign.
Mm-hmm. Do you know of any movement afoot that maybe there's somebody in line to take his place? Or move?
No, I do not know of any move afoot or anyone that is interested or even talked about. I just think there needs to be a change with that type of leadership from the past.
George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
Records here at the Montgomery County Jail show that 54-year-old Juanita McDaniel was arrested and charged today with accepting a bribe, inciting a felony, and another ethics law violation which was not clear on jail records here. She is free on $3,000 bond. Mrs. McDaniel's arrest today comes just days after she was convicted by a Montgomery jury for falsifying state vouchers. It also comes on the heels of an arrest of a former PSC administrative assistant to former PSC Commissioner Jim Ziegler. The jury which indicted Mrs. McDaniels heard evidence against her while she was on trial in Courtroom 5 here in the Montgomery County Courthouse. Nobody from the district attorney's office will comment on where the alleged bribe came from or what the alleged felony was. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery County Jail.
The meeting was much like the one held back in October. The original 81 contentions were again gone over one by one and discussed by all three groups. Safe Energy Alliance attorney Julian McPhillips says the meeting was to narrow down the list of contentions to see which ones will eventually be litigated in court.
We're whittling them down. We're finding areas where we can agree that there are issues that must be decided and litigated, in areas where we feel maybe the problem is not as great as we originally thought. Again, it's a give and take of information. I'd say the criticality issue, though, is the issue where we're having the greatest deal of sparks as to how serious the nature or the possibility of criticality may be. Again, criticality is a thing which could lead to an explosion or excursion of the type that we're so afraid.
McPhillips says SECA, the group he represents, the NRC, and Westinghouse officials have reached agreement on about a third of the 81 contentions. He says the legal process has just begun and will likely take several months before the case reaches the courtroom. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
The fact is, having a money-making high school athletic program is dependent on the number of fans who come to see high school football here at Crampton Bowl on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights. You see, football picks up the tab for other sports programs, like baseball, in some cases basketball and track, and for all of the girls' sports programs. Montgomery High Schools rent Crampton Bowl from the Public Athletic Board for 10% of the gate receipts, plus $200 a night for lighting. In recent years, fan attendance has slacked off at local high school games in the bowl. There's no more standing in line hours in advance to get football tickets. The interest is simply not there. The majority of local high schools are having problems just breaking even on football. Sidney Lanier principal Wiley Cutts.
Years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, we had problems with kids probably slipping in the ballpark, running up and down the aisles, and maybe using foul language, and men just didn't want to bring their families out and be subjected to that kind of thing. But the mayor has provided security now, and that kind of thing is not going on. I think we perceive that a lot of people got out of the habit of coming to high school football games and never have started back. And I think another thing is there's just so much for people to do this day and time with home box office and a lot of private schools playing in town, fall softball leagues and all kinds of things, that unless there's a real good football game that they perceive they want to come see, they just aren't coming. We've all experienced a decrease in enrollment, well, in revenue. Primarily, that's our problem over the last 4 or 5 years. Now, Lanier was fortunate 2 years because we were in the playoffs 2 years in a row, and we played 3 extra games in those years, so the extra revenue sort of carried us over. But the last 2 years, we haven't been winning, and naturally people don't come out to see you when you're not winning.
Lanier's football program is not the only one having financial troubles. Carver football is in a similar situation. And had 23,000 people not shown up for the Lee JD game last year, the football programs at Lee and Jeff Davis would not have broken even a year ago. The Generals have made it to the playoffs this year, and Lee principal Clinton Carter says it will take a big turnout for the Lee football program to break even again in 1980. Tomorrow night, a look at what's being done to get the fans back in the stands. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
Gentlemen, we want to get a completely objective viewpoint of Alabama and Auburn basketball. Coach Smith, what do you think about the prospects of Alabama basketball this year?
I think they're tremendously good. I think things are running well for them. They should have a very good season.
Okay, Coach Sanderson, how about Auburn?
Well, I pick Auburn to win it. I think they've got the material to win. I don't know about the coaching, but they've got the material to win it.
Well, I'd have to agree with that. All right, now, how about Alabama basketball?
Our basketball team's come along real well. They've worked very hard. They've shown a good attitude, and I've just really been pleased with them, Phil.
How about it, Coach?
I feel the same way. I'm very optimistic about our crew. They're playing well. The enthusiasm's high. They're playing well together. I'm very happy.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your complete candor.
If a nuclear war broke out today, what would your chances be for survival? I'm Norman Lumpkin, and beginning Monday night in the 10 o'clock report, I'll be investigating our present civil defense plan on both the national and local levels. I'll be talking with officials of the civil defense and local government leaders who say there is no survival plan that can be used in the event of a nuclear holocaust. War at Home, Can We Survive? Part 1, Monday night in the 10 o'clock report on TV 12. I'm Norman Lumpkin, and tonight I'll be talking with Sam Sloan of the Civil Defense and Governor Fob James about Alabama's current plans for survival in the event of a nuclear holocaust.
we just we would not be prepared in the sense that there would be a bomb shelter where you could put every person in.
I think we're totally inadequately prepared for the atomic type or the nuclear attack disaster, which of course would be the ultimate disaster.
War at Home, Can We Survive? Part 1 tonight on the 10 o'clock report. If a nuclear war broke out today, what would be your chances for survival? I'm Norman Lumpkin. This symbol designates a place where you can go in the event of a nuclear attack. Tonight, I'll talk with area citizens to find out if they know where their shelter is located.
No.
No, sir.
I have no idea.
No, I can't say I do.
Do you know where your fallout shelter is located? War at Home, Can We Survive? Part 2 tonight in the 10 o'clock report on TV 12. I'm Norman Lumpkin. Tonight in the 10 o'clock report, I'll examine the status of our area fallout shelters during Part 3 of War at Home, Can We Survive? At one shelter, I found empty water cans. I checked a stack of water containers, and out of approximately 15, only 2 appear to have water in them. Food stocked in the shelters rotted years ago. It was removed, and it was 20 years old. War at Home, Can We Survive? Part 3 tonight in the 10 o'clock report on TV 12. If a nuclear war broke out today, what would be your chances for survival? I'm Norman Lumpkin, and tonight I'll be talking with Sam Sloan of the Civil Defense about what officials in Washington have planned for your protection in the event of a nuclear disaster.
They initiate these policies or programs with minimal funding. They get them started, and then they withdraw the funding for that particular program because they shifted priorities to another program.
War at Home, Part 4, tonight in the 10 o'clock report on TV 12. If a nuclear war broke out today, what would your chances be for survival? I'm Norman Lumpkin, and tonight in the 10 o'clock report, I'll continue my investigation into our present civil defense plan, a plan that most civil defense officials and government leaders feel does not exist. Plus, I'll give you a close-up look at the Soviet Union and where they stand in the protection of their country in the event of a nuclear holocaust. War at Home, Can We Survive? Part 5, tonight in the 10 o'clock report.
Iowa, January 1st, 1980.
Through the snow?
Hi, Jody. How are you?
Glad to see you, Sarah.
Tom, nice to see you.
How are you?
Nice to see you. Hi, how are you?
Nice to see you. Through the snow?
Jimmy sends his love. He's in the White House, taking care of the normal duties of the presidency.
I believed my husband's story, which he told to me right after the incident.
5. I wish Governor Reagan was here. Oh, how I wish he was here.
Well, we could have done a little better in Iowa.
The next thing is getting on that airplane and going to New Hampshire.
Guess what I'm going to wish? After this is over, they're going to be saying, who won? The winner?
I am paying for this microphone.
The loser?
Jimmy Carter, come out of that White House!
He's in Washington taking care of the crises.
They start off with
Vermont,
Pennsylvania, Wisconsin,
Michigan, Indiana,
and from there down to South Carolina,
Illinois,
into Tennessee,
New Jersey,
and back to Georgia and Texas.
I love New York.
Connecticut.
And I love Connecticut, too.
And then we're going to go home for 2 days,
Oregon, Ohio, and California.
change laundry, and start out again.
I have chosen, after careful deliberation, to pursue an independent course.
Where have you been, Jimmy Carter? Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
He can be of more value as the former president. I have asked that George Bush be nominated.
The hope still lives, and the dream shall never die.
On the road again. Just can't wait to get on the road again.
When the call is very close, the chances are the experts will be divided almost 50-50.
Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
No.
To nothing. You don't have nothing left.
I have been slightly disappointed.
It's like a balloon. It's got to bust.
Could a president do anything in 4 years?
Can we change it? Can we change it? Can we change it?
I am disappointed tonight.
Disappointed, yes. Bruised, no.
Your troubles are over now. Mine have just begun.
Well, that's it, such as it was. I'm John Chancellor. Good night for NBC News.
Tomorrow morning on Today.
This is the first cabinet meeting since the close of the 1980 fiscal year, and Governor James stressed the administration would remain service-oriented. He praised the cabinet for its unwavering determination and dedication to the philosophy and ideals of the new beginning. James says he's proud the Department of Public Safety is cutting down the slaughter on the state highways and for stopping massive murder by cutting into the drug traffic problem. The governor says except for the influx of 1,400 prisoners, the prisons would be out from under a federal court order. He says the prisons are in good shape. He noted earnings have doubled at the state docks, and Pension and Security has a handle on expenses. James says he has a good relationship with the legislature, which approved 7 out of 10 of his legislative programs in the last session. And finally, the governor used the occasion to get a group picture of his cabinet members. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it burns. It's methane gas, and it's produced here at the Econshotty Waste Treatment Plant in North Montgomery. The plant produces about 120 cubic feet of the methane gas per day, which is equivalent to 350 gallons of gasoline, the amount of fuel needed daily to power the 67 vehicles used by the Water and Sewer Board.
Our yearly consumption of gas is about 100,000 gallons a year. So if we can convert methane to burn in our vehicles, this would save the people of Montgomery roughly $60,000 a year. At the same time, conserve 100,000 gallons of gasoline.
The board has applied for a federal grant from the Department of Energy. Oswald says he expects a decision within 6 or 8 weeks.
The cost of the facility would be about $600,000. And of course of this, we would be hopeful that they would fund about 3/4 of it. The facility itself, the main thing that it's for, of course, is to clean up the methane. And this is done through a water process. The gas is forced up through a water bath, and then the impurities in it are taken out of the methane, leaving a gas that's about 98 and 99% methane.
Oswald says the cost to convert each vehicle would be approximately $700, but in the long run, the savings would be substantial because the cost of producing the methane fuel will only be about 45 cents a gallon, as compared to gasoline, which costs more than twice that now. Oswald says if the federal funds are granted, construction of the conversion plant could begin within a few months. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
The Storer Cable TV employees voted 36-24 against forming a union. The Communication Workers of America had petitioned them about 2 months ago. Storer officials think that's due to the Westinghouse teleprompter merger. Company officials say cable TV is now so large there's temptation to organize labor, but they are cautious about the election results.
The election has to be certified by the National Labor Relations Board, and I'd rather not go into it at this time of what could have or could not have been done.
Storer officials will say they are delighted by the results, which they feel is a vote of confidence from their employees. They also say management and employees can work more closely without a union. Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News.
think the immediate task would be to fill some positions which are vacant on that campus. Of course, as you know, there have been 3 people moved from that campus to the Auburn campus, and those are very important positions to us. So we'll try to move as rapidly as possible to get those positions filled and get people in place so that we can continue meeting the challenges that we have in Montgomery.
The Education Trust Fund would have to grow by 13.5% to fund all the programs the legislature appropriated. So October's 11.4% growth rate doesn't pull the state out of proration, but it is encouraging.
State Budget Officer Jimmy Rayford says local school systems received 100% of their allocations in October and even received them on time. That's despite the small balance in the fund when the fiscal year began October 1st. Most trust fund revenue comes from income and sales taxes. In October, income tax revenue went up 11.8%, while sales taxes increased only slightly. A spokesman in the finance director's office says administrators are encouraged but still cautious. They will go ahead with plans to prorate each month's allocations by 7%. But if the economy improves, they say they'll decrease the proration figure and release more than 93% of allocated monies. For the time being, Rayford says it looks as though the trust fund has enough money coming in to fulfill its obligations on time, which means local school systems shouldn't have to borrow money to operate, a practice that's been driving up the cost of education since proration began 2 years ago. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Offensively, Southern Miss is loaded with big play people. Reggie Collier is a good-sized quarterback who's very capable both as a passer and a runner. Bear Bryant had great praise for Collier after the Tide whipped Southern Miss 42-7 earlier this year, the Golden Eagles' only loss in 8 games. Tailback Sammy Winder is leading the country in scoring. Winder scored the lone touchdown against Alabama. Auburn coach Doug Barfield describes Winder as a fine football player. Again, Southern Miss has something to prove. 20 members of the team are from the state of Alabama, and they're overlooked by both Alabama and Auburn. James Brooks could become Auburn's all-time leading rusher tomorrow. The senior running back needs 110 yards, but he'll be going against what Barfield calls the best overall defense Auburn has seen this year. Statistics have meant little to the Tigers. In Auburn's last 2 losses to Mississippi State and Florida, the Tigers have won the battle of statistics only to lose the battle on the scoreboard. 6 times last week, 3 on good drives. Auburn turned the ball over on fumbles or pass interceptions. So the Tigers must improve their concentration Saturday, and that may be hard to do with a dark cloud hanging overhead. It's gut check time for Alabama. The Tide suffered its first defeat in 29 games last week in Jackson and fell from the top spot in both polls. Coach Bear Bryant still talking national championship, though, and that spells problems for LSU. Alabama has one streak still alive. The Tide hasn't lost a game in Tuscaloosa since 1963. 51 straight wins at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Alabama is 7-1 on the season and 3-1 in SEC play. LSU is 6-2 overall and 4-0 in the conference, a surprise to many. The Tigers, despite all the commotion about Georgia, would go to the Sugar Bowl if they defeat Alabama and Mississippi State in their final 2 conference games. LSU has always had a fine defensive team, and this year is no exception. Quarterback Alan Risher is a player Bear Bryant tried to recruit. Risher will try and duplicate with another Tide recruit John Bond did to Alabama last week. Risher is the leading LSU ball carrier since Jesse Miles went out for the season with an injury against Auburn. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
The effort to increase fan support at Crampton Bowl began here 2 weeks ago at the Montgomery County Board of Education.
County School Superintendent Henry Adair appointed an advisory committee made up of the 5 public high school principals in the Montgomery County school system and the county's physical education supervisor, Norman Green. Today, Adair explained the committee's function.
They are to look at the problem of athletic support, knowing that this community through the years has always supported an active athletic program. We feel like that we need to go back and look at what we are doing and more or less get feedback from you people and other people in the community and knowing just what we might do in order to undergird our athletic program in a better way.
Montgomery is not the only city in Alabama experiencing a lack of fan support for public high school football. Similar problems exist in Birmingham and other areas where more than one or two public high schools exist and stadiums are rented for games.
It's been said that winning has a lot to do with the size of the crowd, but not every team can win. So the logical question is, who are the real losers if high school athletic programs have to be cut back for lack of fan support? Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
The Auburn Board of Trustees fully supports Coach Barfield and the Auburn football team in their efforts to win football games. The board will meet again in December 1980 to review the athletic program.
You were quoted earlier as saying that you plan to make a move, to make a motion that in that respect. Did you change your mind on that?
No, it never came to a vote. Everybody there knew how I felt, and I talked for my position, and but I've got to go along with my colleagues, and because I work with them daily as far as Auburn University goes, and of course the athletic program's not the only program we got at Auburn. We are in the academic field, so I've got to get along with everybody, and I'm not expressing myself any further than what I've expressed in the media in the past.
Do you feel like Coach Barfield, then with 3 games to go, can still save his job?
I think that's the feeling of the board.
I'm really too young right now to even think about the Heisman Trophy, and we're working for a SEC title and a national title, and the Heisman Trophy haven't even been on my mind yet.
Family and friends of the Montgomery veterans and Marines joined in the double celebration. The servicemen gave a special tribute to their 52 hostage colleagues in Iran who are now in their 2nd year of captivity. The yellow ribbon symbolizes hope for their safe and speedy return. A wreath was placed in honor of America's disabled veterans. As part of the Marine Corps' 205th birthday, cupcakes were given to the oldest and youngest Marines. Former Conrad William Cook is 67 years old, and Private Kevin Potter is 17. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Every 10 years, Congress decides how many representatives will be allotted to each state on a population basis. And if the new allotment is different from the old, the state legislature must redraw congressional districts so each congressman will end up representing the same number of people. Alabama lawmakers also face the controversial task of realigning the state's legislative districts from which members of the House and Senate are elected. The new districts will have to reflect the shifts in the state's population over the past 10 years. Representative Rick Manley, co-chairman of the Committee on Reapportionment, anticipates some broad changes.
I think we will have a good bit of shifting because you've got several growth areas in the state that have grown substantially. You take Shelby County and the districts just around the southern part of Jefferson County, substantial growth, and when you have growth there, you're going to cause a shift. It's going to have a mushrooming or a domino effect out into the other districts.
Redistricting the legislature is tough. The last time it was done by the federal courts.
Do you think the legislature will be able to do it, or is the federal court going to have to step in again?
I think the legislature can do it. I'm very optimistic that we can, and I think that we definitely will come up with what will be a sound and acceptable bill.
The actual drawing or redrawing of the congressional and legislative lines won't begin until next year. It's doubtful the legislature can resolve reapportionment and redistricting questions until late 1981, and that will require a special session.
It would be my prediction. I just don't see how we can possibly get the figures well into the second half of the regular session of 1981, and you know the load that normally develops as we get into the latter part of the session, and have any chance of putting a bill together, working it out as complicated as it will be.
Some lawsuits have been filed disputing preliminary census figures as being too low. And in one case, a federal court has ruled the count must be retaken. If a decision affecting Detroit, Michigan is upheld, the similar suits could be filed. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.